What would you do if, in the middle of the night, a stranger with a peaceful look asked you for water on a road with no signal? And as soon as he got into your cab, everything started to become impossible to explain. Before continuing, subscribe right now and stay until the end. This story of a delivery man who stopped when no one else did holds an answer that could change the way you look at strangers, and at yourself. We delivery drivers tend to know the secrets of the asphalt better than maps. My name is Iker Valdez, and I drive a medium-dry van with the faded logo of a company that delivers everything from urgent medicines to machine parts. My night route crosses towns where the lights go out early and gas stations that survive on old coffee and battery radios. I am no hero. I'm the one who arrives, delivers, signs, and moves on. Or at least that's what I believed before that night. It was dry heat season. The dashboard read 048 and the fuel needle was steady, just above half. In the back compartment I was carrying 2 bundles of lathe parts, a cooler with saline solution for a community clinic, and 3 unexplained packages. The label said, "Fragile," with an arrow pointing upward, as if the arrow could hold up the world. The windshield reflected a horizon breathing heat waves even at that hour. The AC was off, to spare the engine on the climbs. The radio, silent for lack of signal. Me, awake by force of routine and coffee. I saw the figure when I could no longer pretend it was a shadow. At first I thought it might be some lost hiker, then a drunk out of nowhere, or a migrant who had taken the wrong path. He was standing on the shoulder, barefoot, in a light tunic stained with dust, strands of hair stuck to his forehead with sweat. He wasn't hitchhiking. He was waving. His hand raised, as if he had been waiting for me, specifically for me. I don't know why, but I braked. I rolled down the window. The air outside had that hot metal smell you learn to respect. "Are you all right?" I asked, trying to make my voice sound professional, like someone asking for a tracking number. "I'm thirsty," he said. The voice didn't sound in my ears, it sounded in my chest. I handed him the backup bottle, the one with the blue cap, that I keep for emergencies. He received it with both hands, as if I was giving him more than water, as if I was handing him back his breath. He drank slowly, without anxiety, with respect for each sip. Then he lowered the bottle and looked at me. "Thank you. You did stop." The phrase hung between us like a bell that keeps vibrating after it rings. It wasn't reproach or praise, just truth. "Where are you headed?" I asked. "I can take you to a town." "I'm going down this road," he answered. "I know it. If you take me, the signal will come faster." "What signal?" He barely smiled. Didn't answer. And I, who after a certain incident had sworn never to pick up strangers again, opened the passenger door. He got in with no backpack, no wallet, no phone. Only that heavy serenity that suddenly made the cab feel bigger. I started driving. The gears slipped in as if the transmission had gotten good news. The man looked ahead, unhurried. His hands rested on his legs and, I don't know why, I noticed his palms. They had dark marks, like old shadows that weren't open wounds but still hurt to look at. "What's your name?" I asked, to tame the silence. "I've been called many things," he said. "You can call me Jesus." The name stayed between us like a guest who doesn't pay rent but brings warm bread. I'm not one to believe at first sight. I'm the kind who inventories, weighs, check seals, and expiration dates. I wanted to laugh, say, "Sure, and I'm the traffic director of miracles." I didn't laugh. I kept driving. Because there was something else, something that doesn't rest on proof but on an impossible recognition. That gaze that sees inside you and doesn't make you ashamed. The route tightened into blind curves. On the sides, bushes that looked like sleeping animals. The moon, hard-working, lighting just enough. The dashboard read 107. The man, Jesus, put his hand on the plastic and said, "Stop at the next clearing." "Here? There's nothing." Exactly. A dirt path appeared, almost invisible, biting into the hillside. I turned off the engine, grabbed the flashlight, and we got out. The night carried an improbable freshness. We walked following a sound that wasn't from animals. It was the slow rattle of an old engine. The little house appeared at the last second, as if it had materialized at the sound of our steps. From inside came the fragile groan of someone struggling to breathe and the trembling pulse of a radio with dying batteries. I pushed the door, which wasn't locked. A young woman was holding the head of an old man with clouded eyes. On the table, an empty blister pack of pills. "Sorry," I said. "I'm a delivery driver. I was passing on the road and—" "There's no clinic nearby," she said without asking for explanations. "The medicine ran out. He's not responding well. I don't know what to do." Jesus walked closer without a sound. He touched the old man's forehead. What he murmured wasn't a prayer from a holy card. It was something like a word we don't know but the body does. The old man's chest changed its rhythm. The woman covered her mouth with her hand and cried, not out of fear this time, but of relief. "We can take them tomorrow morning," I said, trying to do something concrete. "I have saline, maybe it can help stabilize him." "Thank you," she said, without taking her eyes off Jesus, as if she was trying to remember him from somewhere else. We returned to the road with the silence changed. Not that there was less noise. There was more space to hear what matters. I glanced sideways at the man sitting next to me. He didn't seem tired or hungry. He seemed attentive to something I couldn't grasp. "Do you know this route?" I asked, not wanting to be left alone with my own questions. "Every curve holds a name," he said. "And today some hold yours." I swallowed hard. I turned up the radio out of pure habit, and the static arranged itself into an old song that said pain should not make us indifferent. I turned it down without thinking. The dashboard, for the first time in weeks, wasn't vibrating. The engine sounded as if it wanted to accompany us, not push us. "Are you running away from someone?" I heard myself say. "I'm going toward someone," he replied. "Toward those who are tired inside." I didn't ask, "And why do you think I—" No need. There are truths that, when spoken, were already said. 15 minutes later the skeleton of a rest stop appeared. Rusty roof, gas pumps devoured by rust, a shrunken shadow between two columns. It was a boy, thin as an apology, with a frayed cap and a sweatshirt that had seen better days. He coughed with those coughs that scrape inside. He stood up as best he could when he saw us. "I have nothing," he said, raising his hands. "Don't hurt me." "Nobody's going to take anything from you," I said, almost at the same time Jesus nodded. I went for the first aid kit, a clean shirt, and 2 cereal bars. The smell of fever is different. You learn it when you drive at dawn. He had a wound on his forearm, poorly treated. "What's your name?" I asked while cleaning the area with saline. He took a while to answer, as if choosing a name meant choosing to come back. "Bruno," he finally said. "Bruno, you can't stay here," I told him. "Get in with us. We'll take you somewhere safe." He climbed in slowly, with that mix of fear and hope that weighs more than any suitcase. I handed him a blanket. The back seat, my makeshift cot on long trips, became his refuge. I started the engine. The van responded as if its shocks had been replaced. I don't know how to explain it, but everything felt smoother. "Why do you help?" Bruno asked after a few kilometers. "Nobody helps me." "Because someone once stopped for me," I answered, surprising myself with my own words. "And because there are nights you wouldn't wish even on your worst enemy." Jesus looked out the window as if he heard a river where I only saw hills. He said nothing. No need. The tired dawn began to release the first gray of day. That's when I saw the red lights of a car stopped where they shouldn't have been. Hood open. A young woman pacing back and forth holding a useless phone. Next to her, a girl with an empty bottle. I braked on instinct. Bruno got out with me. Jesus took the bottle without asking, walked a few steps toward some bushes, and came back with it full. Nobody asked how. The girl drank with that beautiful urgency of those returning to water. The woman began to cry. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You already are," Jesus replied. "You're caring." We got back into the cab without words. Some gestures, if you narrate them too much, slip through the cracks. Has a single decision, like stopping for a stranger, ever pushed you into a chain of encounters you can't forget? Subscribe and stay until the end, because I'll reveal what signal he was waiting for and why it had my name written on it. The answer comes when you least expect it. We passed the usual checkpoint. An officer with red, sleepless eyes asked for my papers. I handed them over. He looked into the cab, straight at Jesus. It was a second. He lowered his hand from the gun, not because we were suspects, but because something in his face softened, like when you remember you were once someone's child. He nodded. We moved on. At the kilometer mark where I always feel the van lose strength, Jesus said. Ahead there's a dangerous curve. Someone will arrive in too much of a hurry, and he won't know there's a child on the sidewalk. My heart struck like a steel drum. I didn't question. I gripped the wheel. The rain began as if the sky were rehearsing, and in seconds it was a show. Wipers. Plug. Black asphalt, shining like a wet knife. The sharp curve sign appeared twisted, as if it too were afraid. The car came skidding. Black, old, no traction. On the right, a soaked boy with a backpack almost bigger than himself. Everything happened in 2 long seconds. I honked. I invaded the curve with my high beams pinned on the other windshield. The car went into the ditch. The boy was safe. Bruno ran to cover him with the blanket. I got out with the weak legs you have after holding a life with one gesture. It's over now, champ, Bruno told him. It's over. I got lost, the boy said through sobs. My sister got into a car and I couldn't catch up. We took him to a patrol a few kilometers ahead. The officers recognized him. They'd been looking for him. I saw the hug he received and felt my body allow me to return to my own. That strange sensation of having been outside for a second, pulling on an invisible thread so nothing would break. We went back to the road with our hands still trembling, but it was another kind of tremor, the one that comes from having done what was needed. Jesus kept silent. Sometimes silence is the only way not to break something sacred. The next stop wasn't asked by me or by him. It was asked by the smell of old wood coming from an adobe chapel by the roadside. We went in. Crooked benches, an altar with dust, and a hand-carved cross by someone who tried to say with wood what they couldn't say with words. I sat in the back pew, closed my eyes. I didn't pray. I just let memory do its work. I saw my mother laughing in the kitchen. I saw my brother, the one I haven't spoken to in years, with his way of clenching his teeth when he's about to cry. Above all, I saw the message I never sent, Lucia, how are you? That simple question one postpones until it's too late to dare. Jesus ran his fingers over the altar. He uncovered the engraving of 2 hands in relief, intertwined. Once here, a couple promised themselves a future, believing love was enough, he said. Sometimes love doesn't end. It dries out. Bruno, on the bench next to me, clutched the blanket. Outside, the sky opened like an eyelid. We went out with a silent idea installed among the 3 of us. We slept an hour in the cab, me on the seat with the backrest pushed down, Bruno curled up, Jesus with his forehead against the window as if listening to the murmur of the world. We woke with the first sun peeking over the mountains and a different kind of tiredness, not of the body, but of what one carries inside after too long without speaking. I headed toward the city where I had to complete 3 deliveries. I didn't want to drive the van right up to the bakery on the corner of the square. I parked a block away, looked at the facade. The sign read, La Brasa Dulce. I crossed with that fear that comes more from within than from outside. Jesus stayed in the cab with Bruno. The doorbell was sharper than I remembered other doors to be. Behind the counter, a young woman with her hair tied up in a high ponytail was arranging cornbread on a tray. Hi, I said. I don't want to bother you. I just wanted to know if you're okay. She looked at me the way you look at someone who arrives late without excuse. I'm working, she said. What are you doing here? I searched for a perfect phrase. Didn't find one. I said the true one. I came to ask forgiveness for not being there when I should have been. And to tell you that I love you even if it doesn't seem like it. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She put down the tray. She looked at me as if weighing the consistency of my words. I don't know if I can forgive you today, she said. "You don't have to," I replied. "I just wanted to open the door." The smell of freshly baked bread filled the silence. She took a plate. "Do you want to try? They say this one comes out well." "I always wanted to try it here," I said. And in that ridiculously simple phrase, a small but solid bridge was built. We ate in silence. We weren't yet a movie-reconciled father and daughter. We were two people who had learned to breathe in the same room without suffocating. I went back to the cab with something that isn't joy but contains it: peace. Jesus didn't ask me anything. He only said, "One signal is missing." "The phone signal?" I joked out of habit. "The heart signal, when it knows in time," he replied. I started the engine. The road toward the point where I had found him opened as if it had always been waiting for us. The sun was just peeking out when we returned to the route where it had all begun. I didn't ask why. I simply followed the instinct that had been growing since that man got into my van. Bruno slept in the back seat, breathing with the calm of someone who finally finds a place where he's not being chased. Jesus looked at the horizon as if he could read it. The road widened into a stretch of flatland. There, the mist rose slowly, like a curtain before the first scene of a play. I braked, turned off the engine. The three of us got out. The ground crunched under our boots. Jesus pointed to the earth. "Here I asked for water," he said. Here it all began. I looked at the same dust that had seemed ordinary to me just hours earlier. This time it wasn't. It was a marked place, not with paint or stakes, but with memory. As if the world kept the imprint of every decision. "Why me?" I asked almost in a whisper. I could have kept going. Anyone could have passed by first. But they didn't, Jesus replied calmly. "You did." I stayed silent. There was no answer against that. What tormented me, instead, was what he had said before, the signal. What signal could be waiting for me? I didn't take long to find out. I started the engine again. We had barely gone a few kilometers when the van emitted a sharp beep. I looked at the dashboard. A message was flashing on the phone screen, plugged into the charger. The device, which had been dead all night without signal, suddenly vibrated as if waking from a long sleep. A single message came in. "Unknown number. Short text, don't run anymore. Call me." My heart lurched. That message couldn't be there. There was no coverage. I knew that well. I braked sharply. Bruno woke with a start. "What happened?" he asked. I showed him the screen. Jesus wasn't surprised. He only said, "Sometimes the signal doesn't come through antennas. It comes when you're willing to hear it." I kept staring at the number. It wasn't saved, but I recognized it. Or rather, I felt it. It was from my brother, Julian. We hadn't spoken in more than 10 years, since that fight over my father's inheritance, since the shouting, the fists on the table, since we swore never to speak again. I hated him. Or so I told myself. But deep down there was only a wound that had never healed. Bruno looked at me with anxious eyes. "And what are you going to do? Are you going to answer?" I didn't know what to say. Jesus was clearer. The signal itself isn't what matters. It's what you do with it. Have you ever received a message that forced you to face a past you thought was buried? Stay until the end and subscribe, because when Iker decides whether to answer or not, you'll discover that this call has more to do with his destiny as a delivery man than it seems. I put the phone away on the dashboard without replying. The fear of hearing Julian's voice again squeezed me like a badly fastened belt. I decided to keep driving. The road went into a stretch of long curves and dense pine forests. The smell of resin mixed with that of wet earth. Bruno was silent, clutching his blanket. Jesus, as always, looked beyond. We reached a tiny village, barely 20 wooden houses and a kiosk with a rusted roof. There were barefoot children playing and skinny dogs chasing shadows. I decided to stop in front of a small store to buy bread and coffee. The owner, an old man with a palm hat, came out to serve me. His gaze stopped on Jesus. He froze, lips trembling. "You," he said on the verge of tears. You had been here before. Jesus smiled without saying anything. Once, when the fountain still gave water, the old man added, I didn't ask anything else. The man gave us bread, fruit, even some cookies, without charging us. He only said, God bless you. We left, and Jesus stopped in front of the town square. The fountain was dry, turned into a bowl of dust. He knelt, placed his hand on the stone, closed his eyes. In seconds, a timid drip began to sound. Then a thin stream. Then a fresh jet that started to fill the basin as if it had never stopped flowing. The children screamed with joy. The adults came out of their houses. Some cried. The air filled with laughter and voices. Bruno couldn't take his eyes off the scene. Neither could I. Jesus stood up. He looked at me and said, Sometimes a fountain only needs someone to believe it can flow again. I said nothing. I couldn't. The murmur of the newly resurrected fountain still rang in my ears long after we left that town behind. Bruno stared out the window as if he had just seen real magic for the first time. I tried not to think too much, but it was impossible. Each stop seemed to have a direct message, as if someone had drawn this route not on the asphalt, but in my own memory. Jesus, serene, spoke after several kilometers of silence. The signal still waits. I knew what he meant. The message on the phone, that number I recognized even though it hurt me. The number of Julian, my brother. I gripped the wheel. Didn't answer. I couldn't. I preferred to look at the horizon, as if the road could give me an excuse to keep avoiding. Hours passed. The sky covered with dense clouds. On the dashboard, the clock read 17:12. The storm was near. And just before the first drop hit the windshield, Jesus said, Nogales. I turned to look at him. What's in Nogales? Someone who has been waiting for you for many years. The name came straight to my mind, Julian. I swallowed hard. Asked no more. I knew it was true. The journey grew heavy with rain. Bruno slept in the back seat, clinging to his blanket like a shield. I could hardly think. The memory of the last time I saw my brother hit me without warning. My father's house still smelling of funeral incense, the table full of inheritance papers, the shouting. Me accusing him of being greedy. Him accusing me of abandoning the old man in his last days. Fists raised. The promise never to cross paths again. We reached Nogales at night. The city was a strange mosaic of lights, walls, and silences. Jesus calmly guided me through side streets to a neighborhood of low houses. At the end of a dusty block, he pointed to a white, peeling facade. It's here. I parked. My heart pounded like a drum. Bruno looked at me from the back seat. Are you going in? I didn't know what to say. I got out. Walked to the door as if carrying tons in my feet. Knocked. They took a while to open. When they did, there he was. Julian. Thinner, grayer, older, but with the same hard gaze I remembered. What are you doing here? He asked without opening fully. I took a deep breath. I didn't come to argue. I just wanted to see you. The silence was long. His eyes searched mine for a lie. He didn't find one. He opened the door a little wider. Come in. I entered. The kitchen smelled of bitter coffee. We sat face to face. The air was heavy. I didn't know where to start. Neither did he. Until at last I let it out. I failed you. I left when you needed me most. I didn't know how to stay. And later I didn't know how to come back. Julian stayed silent. Then sighed. You're not here for yourself, he said. Someone brought you. I didn't want to deny it. I just nodded. The talk flowed like stagnant water that finally finds an outlet. We spoke of my father, of the inheritance that no longer mattered, of the years gone without forgiveness. He spoke of his loneliness, of his wife's death, of entire nights not knowing why to go on. I spoke of Lucia, of how I drifted away from my own daughter, of how the road became my excuse to run away. And at some point, without saying it in exact words, we forgave each other. We hugged. Awkward, rough but true. Like two men who know they no longer have time to keep hating. When we left the house, Jesus was waiting for us on the sidewalk. Julian looked at him and said, "I don't know who you are, but thank you." Jesus didn't answer. He just placed a hand on his shoulder and smiled. "Back in the van?" Bruno asked. "And now what?" Jesus replied without looking back. "Now comes the hardest curve." "Which one?" I asked. He looked at me with tenderness and a shadow of sadness. "The one of the forgiveness you owe yourself." I froze. I didn't know what to say. I started the engine and we went on. The road, under the faint moonlight, seemed to trace a map only he could read. Have you ever felt that the hardest forgiveness wasn't toward others, but toward yourself? Subscribe and stay until the end, because in the next part Iker will face his deepest wound, the reunion with his daughter, and what happens there will forever change the course of this story. The night wrapped us in a cloak of restless stars. Bruno dozed in the back seat, but I couldn't close my eyes. Jesus' words echoed in my head, "The forgiveness you owe yourself." What exactly did it mean? How does one forgive oneself after carrying guilt for years like sacks of cement? Jesus, sitting next to me, seemed to read my thoughts. "There is no heavier road than that of remorse," he said softly. "But it's also the one that brings the most relief when finally traveled." I stayed silent. I knew it well. Ever since Lucia, my daughter, had turned her back on me, I had preferred to flee to miles of highways, to faceless deliveries, rather than face her. The last time we spoke, she shouted that she never wanted to see me again, that I only knew how to sit behind a wheel and not behind her when she needed me most. She was right. I had failed. Jesus broke the silence. "She lives in Hermosillo." I looked at him, surprised. "How do you know?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. I already knew. I had always known. A neighbor had told me years ago, "Your daughter works at a bakery downtown." But I never dared to go. The fear of rejection weighed more than any load in the van. Bruno woke up and looked at us both. "Are you going to see her?" he asked, as if it were obvious. I took a deep breath. I didn't answer. I turned the wheel south. We drove for hours until dawn painted the horizon orange and gold. Hermosillo appeared before me like unknown territory, though I had passed through hundreds of times. But this time it wasn't the city that intimidated me. It was one person in it. Jesus showed me where to stop, a few blocks from the bakery. The sign read La Esperanza. I stared at it from afar. My heart pounded violently. I felt my feet wouldn't obey me. I turned to Jesus. "I can't." He didn't insist. He only said, "Love doesn't guarantee it won't hurt, but silence guarantees it will wither." I finally got out. I crossed the street as if walking on coals. The doorbell rang, and there she was. Lucia. My daughter. Hair tied back, a blue apron, hands busy arranging cornbread. Her face, stronger, more adult, more distant than in my memories. She turned when she heard the bell. Our eyes met. The tray she was holding trembled. "Hi," I said, my voice breaking. "I don't want to bother you. I just wanted to know if you're okay." Her gaze was hard, but in the depths there was a damp shine. "What are you doing here?" she asked dryly. "I don't know," I confessed. "But I had to come. Even if you don't talk to me. Even if you don't forgive me. I just wanted to see you." The silence was heavy as lead. Finally, Lucia set the tray on the counter. "It's been 7 years," she said. 7. Dad. And in all that time, not a call when Mom died. Not a letter. Nothing. I lowered my head. Tears burned. I know. And I have no excuses. Just fear. And cowardice. But I love you. Even if I didn't know how to show it. Lucia blinked several times. Her lips trembled, but she held back. After a long silence, she murmured, "I don't know if I can forgive you today." "You don't have to," I replied quickly. "I just wanted you to know I'm here." Another silence. This time, different. Not cold, not sharp. A silence that left a crack through which a ray of hope could enter. Lucia took a deep breath. Then, almost awkwardly, she asked, "Do you want cornbread?" I laughed through tears. Nodded. I sat at one of the tables. She served me a slice and a cup of coffee. We ate in silence. We weren't yet reconciled father and daughter. We were two human beings opening, at least, a small door. From the van, Bruno watched us with shining eyes. Jesus, sitting beside him, seemed to hear another melody, as if listening to the murmur of a river beneath the city. When I returned to the vehicle, I carried on my face something that wasn't joy, but peace. Jesus looked at me. "You opened the door," he said. "And that's enough." I started the engine. I didn't ask where we were going. For the first time in years, the destination didn't matter. What mattered was the road. Can you imagine what it feels like to reunite with someone you thought you had lost forever? The afternoon was falling when we left Hermosillo behind. My heart was alight, still carrying the echo of Lucia's, "I don't know if I can forgive you today." It might seem little, but for me it was everything. It was a crack in the wall, proof that there was still something to save. Bruno slept sprawled in the back seat, hugging his sketchbook. Jesus remained serene, gazing out the window as if he knew the story wasn't over yet. I drove in silence for kilometers until suddenly, he spoke. "There's one last stop." "Which one?" I asked, almost afraid. Jesus turned his head and looked at me with that calm that always seemed to pierce me. "The same place where you stopped for me the first time. Where I asked for water." I knew immediately he was right. The journey couldn't end anywhere else. We had to return to kilometer zero. The road toward the desert stretched out like a memory that refused to disappear. I drove slowly, as if every meter were a premature farewell. Bruno, half asleep, opened his eyes when he felt the van stop. "Are we there?" he asked sleepily. "Yes," I answered. At the beginning of it all. I turned off the engine. The silence of the desert was different from that of the city. Heavy, vibrant, full of invisible voices. The three of us got out. The air was fresh, as if the night wanted to caress us. Jesus bent down, took a handful of sand, and let it slip through his fingers. "Here it began," he said. "Here the rest of the road was written." I looked at him without knowing what to say. I felt something inside me was about to break. "And now what?" I asked, my throat tight. Jesus looked at me tenderly. "Now I go where there is thirst, and you go where there are deliveries. But now you don't deliver only packages. You deliver something more." Bruno came closer, and Jesus knelt before him. He touched his chest with 2 fingers. "Don't hide your light to fit into the darkness," he told him. "What you saw on this road is your mission, to remind others that it's still possible to believe." The boy hugged him tightly. Then Jesus turned to me. His gaze was infinite. "And me?" I asked, my voice breaking. "You already performed your miracle the day you stopped the truck," he said. "That was your act of faith. Never forget, the miracle wasn't me. It was you, when you decided not to keep going." He hugged me. It was a different kind of hug, as if it aligned my soul into place. And when I opened my eyes, he was gone. Only the echo of the wind in the desert remained, and the certainty that I had shared the road with someone who didn't belong to this world, but had chosen to walk with me for a stretch. Bruno and I returned to the van in silence. I started the engine. The motor sounded clean, light, as if it too had been touched. We drove for hours until we saw, by the roadside, an older couple with a broken-down car. I stopped without thinking. Got out and helped them change a tire. We shared water and a few words. Before leaving, the woman took my hand. "It shows in your eyes," she said. "You deliver more than packages." I smiled. Didn't explain anything. Kept driving. Bruno looked at me from the back seat. "Where are we going now?" I looked at the endless line of road beneath the starry sky, and answered, Wherever someone needs us to stop. The road opened before us, endless. I no longer drove to run away. I drove to find. Can you imagine what it means that an ordinary delivery man could become the signal others were waiting for? The road stayed open before us as if it never wanted to end. Bruno was asleep again in the back seat, holding the blanket that had already become his. I drove calmly, with a different feeling. I wasn't running, I was available. Ready to stop whenever needed. The dashboard clock read 3:17 a.m. when I saw something strange. By the roadside, in the middle of nowhere, there was a small church. It wasn't unusual to see lonely chapels along the route, but this one had all its candles lit, illuminating the interior even though there was no one around. I stopped. The air outside was cold and smelled of old rain. "Let's go in," I told Bruno when he woke up. We entered. The interior was spotless. Clean benches, fresh flowers, a gleaming altar. But the strangest thing was the silence. It wasn't empty, it was a full silence, as if someone were listening to us. I sat on one of the benches. Bruno stood, observing. Suddenly, the sound of a phone broke the calm. It was mine. I looked at it in disbelief. No signal, no data, no way it could ring. But it rang. I answered with a trembling hand. "Iker." It was the voice of Lucia, my daughter. "Lucia," was all I could manage to say. "I just wanted to tell you, thank you for coming today." Her broken voice pierced me. I don't know how I felt, but I know something changed. I stayed silent, tears running down my face. "I love you too, Dad," she said before hanging up. I looked at the phone. The call didn't appear in the log. Not a second marked. Nothing. It was as if it had never happened. But I had heard it. I had felt it. Bruno looked at me, eyes wide. "Was it her?" he asked. I nodded, unable to speak. We stayed in that deserted church for quite a while, until the candles began extinguishing on their own, one by one, as if an invisible curtain were closing. We stepped out again into the cold of the highway. I started the engine and looked at the sky. For an instant, I swear, I saw a silhouette walking in the distance, illuminated by the moon. It wasn't a goodbye. It was a reminder. There was still road left to travel. We drove on again, with no destination except that of the road itself. The sky was clear, and the stars seemed to accompany us like silent beacons. Bruno no longer asked, "Where are we going?" He seemed to understand that the destination always revealed itself when it was time. After almost an hour, a rusty sign appeared lit by the headlights. San Geronimo, 3 kilometers. I knew road maps well and could swear that town didn't exist. Even so, I decided to follow the sign. The side road was narrow, flanked by trees like walls. When we finally arrived, I froze. The place was completely deserted. Empty streets, open windows, doors hanging from rusty hinges. It was as if everyone had abandoned the town overnight. "It's dead," Bruno murmured, hugging his blanket. "Or asleep," I replied, not knowing why. We drove down the main street until we reached the square. There, in the center, was a dry fountain with a broken angel statue. Everything was in ruins, except one thing. On the facade of the town church, a warm light shone that couldn't be from electricity. "Let's go in," I said. The door was ajar. I pushed it open, and a heavy air greeted us. Inside, the impossible. Dozens of candles burning, illuminating perfectly aligned pews. There was no dust. No cobwebs. It looked as if someone had cared for the place every day, even though the whole town was dead. On the first pew, there was something. I went closer. It was a notebook. A leather cover, old but well kept. I opened it. Every page was filled with short phrases, testimonies. People giving thanks for having been heard, for being saved in a critical moment, for finding strength when they couldn't go on. They weren't prayers to a saint. They were notes addressed to someone they called by different names: the man of the road, the traveler, the teacher. A shiver ran through me. "It's him," Bruno whispered. All these people saw him. I turned page after page, and each seemed to echo what I myself had lived. Until I reached the last one. It had no date, no signature. It only said, "When you see him, give him water. He already knows what to do with the rest." I froze, closed the notebook, felt like the air was missing. Bruno looked at me with eyes full of questions. What does it mean? I had no answer. But what I did know was this: San Geronimo wasn't a ghost town, it was a reminder. A record of miracles that had happened on the road. And somehow, I was now part of that story. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps. We both turned. In the church doorway, a silhouette in a light tunic appeared for an instant. It looked at us, smiled, and vanished in a blink. Bruno gasped. I pressed the notebook to my chest. Silence filled everything once again. We left the church without a word. Got into the van. I drove out of San Geronimo, and when I looked in the rearview mirror, the sign announcing the town was gone. Have you ever felt that an impossible place appeared just to give you an answer? Subscribe and stay until the end, because what Iker and Bruno are about to discover at the next stop will connect directly with the mission Jesus had left them. The road still holds a greater destiny. We left the enigma of San Geronimo with our hearts beating faster than normal. Bruno was silent, clutching his notebook like a treasure. I couldn't stop thinking about that last phrase written, "When you see him, give him water. He already knows what to do with the rest." The dashboard of the van remained lit normally, until suddenly something strange happened. A notification appeared on the integrated GPS screen. There was no satellite connection in that area. I knew it well. But there it was, a new delivery registered in the system. Destination: Kilometer 47, Dirt Road Turnoff. Delivery: urgent. I frowned. That route didn't exist in my itinerary. That wasn't on the list, I murmured. Bruno leaned forward to read. What are you going to do? I looked at him in the rearview mirror. I knew the answer before saying it. We're going to deliver. I turned the wheel toward the turnoff. The road was rough, loose dirt and stones. We moved slowly, the headlights cutting through the darkness. After a few minutes, an isolated little house appeared, without electricity. On the porch, an elderly woman was waiting, holding a weak flashlight. I stopped, got out with the package in my arms. Did you request a delivery? I asked. The woman nodded, tears in her eyes. I knew you would come. My husband is very ill. We have nothing here, and no one comes up to this place. I went in with her. On an improvised bed lay an old man, struggling to breathe. The package trembled in my hands. I opened it. Inside was a box of medicine, exactly the kind he needed. I knew because my mother had taken the same ones before she died. The woman covered her face and wept. I didn't understand anything. Who had loaded that package into my van? How had it appeared in my system? Bruno was as shocked as I was. Do you realize? He said softly. It's not that you choose the deliveries. The deliveries choose you. I was speechless. I just nodded. Before we left, the man on the bed opened his eyes and murmured, "Thank you for stopping." The same phrase I had heard that first night in the desert. As we stepped outside, I looked at the sky. One star shone brighter than the others, as if guiding the way. I started the engine. The dashboard no longer showed any delivery notification. Everything had disappeared. But I knew the journey wasn't over yet. The engine purred softly, as if it too knew there was more to come. Bruno kept staring at the dashboard, as though waiting for another impossible notification. I tried to focus on the road, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was guiding us on purpose. And then it happened. The phone vibrated in the glove box. I took it. On the screen appeared a new notice from the delivery system. Pending package. Recipient: unknown. Delivery: untransferable. I felt a shiver. I had never seen anything like it. Normally, shipping guides have a name, address, required signature. But this looked like a message written directly for me. I opened the back compartment of the van. Among boxes of spare parts and ordinary bundles, there was a small package, wrapped in brown paper, tied with string in a cross. It weighed nothing. So light it seemed empty. I took it in my hands and carried it to the cab. Bruno looked at it wide-eyed. "Are you going to open it?" I hesitated. There was no recipient, but it did say non-transferable. That could only mean one thing. The package was mine. With trembling hands, I untied the string. The paper unfolded silently. Inside was a notebook, just like the one we found in San Geronimo, but new, clean, with blank pages. On the first page, written in clear handwriting, there was only one sentence. "Write what you have seen. The road needs memory." I froze. Bruno whispered, "That package was for you from the beginning." I turned the pages. All were blank, waiting. I closed the notebook against my chest and felt something I hadn't felt in years: purpose. I wasn't just a delivery man of things. Now I understood. I was a delivery man of stories, of memory, of faith. I looked at Bruno. "Maybe this is my real job." He smiled. "Then you're not alone. I saw it too. I'll tell it too." The van kept moving under a starry sky that seemed to open wider and wider. In the rearview mirror, I swore I saw for an instant the silhouette of Jesus walking along the roadside, with the same calm as that first night. I blinked. He was gone. But the message was clear. The last delivery wasn't a package, it was a mission. The night moved calmly on. Bruno slept against the back window, but I couldn't. The notebook lay on my lap, open and blank, like a challenge. "Write what you have seen," the first page said. I took a pen from the dashboard. Hesitated. "I'm not a writer. I'm a delivery man. I'm used to guides, invoices, receipts, not filling pages with memories." But something inside me pushed. I wrote the first sentence. "Everything began when I stopped the truck to give water to a man in the middle of the desert." The words flowed on their own, one after another. My hand moved almost without my permission. Each encounter was etched onto the page: the little house with the sick old man, Bruno trembling at the abandoned gas station, the woman with the dehydrated girl, the fountain that flowed again, the embrace with Julian, the reunion with Lucia. Everything. When I looked up, hours had passed. The sky was already lightening with the first tones of dawn. The pen was hot in my fingers, as if it had written fire. Bruno woke up and saw me. "What are you writing?" he asked. I showed him the filled pages. He read them with shining eyes. "This isn't just for you," he said. "This is for everyone who needs to believe the road holds more than fatigue." I nodded. I knew it. It wasn't just a memory. It was a mission. Suddenly, the van began to fill with a strange aroma, sweet, like fresh spring flowers. Bruno noticed it too. We both turned toward the passenger seat. For a second, barely a blink, the silhouette of Jesus was there, looking at the notebook with tenderness. Then he disappeared. The message was clear. What mattered wasn't to keep seeing him, but to keep writing. That same afternoon we stopped in a small town to refuel. While the attendant filled the tank, a group of children played in the nearby square. One of them, curious, came up and asked me, "Are you the delivery man who helps on the road?" I froze. "Who told you that?" I asked. The boy pointed toward the horizon. "Everyone knows. They say you drive with the teacher." I didn't know what to reply. I just gave him one of the cookies I kept in the glove compartment. The boy took it as if it were a treasure. When we got back on the road, Bruno looked at me with a mix of fear and excitement. "You're no longer just a delivery man," he said. "Now you're part of his route." I gripped the wheel, looked at the notebook on the passenger seat, and I understood. Every story I wrote would be a spark lit in the darkness. The road opened into a quiet valley. The sun was slowly sinking, coloring the horizon in orange and violet. I drove with a notebook on the passenger seat, and though I hadn't opened it again since dawn, I felt its weight as if it glowed from within. Bruno eyed it curiously. "What if we read it aloud?" he suggested. I thought for a moment. I had never read anything of mine out loud, but something told me I should. I parked by a rest stop where some families were resting. We took out the notebook. I began to read the first page. It all began when I stopped the truck to give water to a man in the middle of the desert. The voices of others faded. People began to gather. A couple of truckers, a mother with her children, an old man smoking in silence. I read, and each word seemed to carry a different weight, as if they weren't just letters, but echoes of something greater. When I finished recounting the first part, the old man wiped a tear. That happened to me once, he murmured. I saw someone like that on the road 30 years ago. I thought I was crazy, but now I understand. One of the mothers hugged her daughter tightly. Another trucker, with a hard look, asked if he could copy a few lines. It was as if the pages touched something everyone carried inside. Bruno smiled proudly. Do you see? He told me softly. It's not a notebook, it's a mirror. It gives back what they already know, but had forgotten. That night we slept at the rest stop. And when I woke, I discovered something that took my breath away. There were new sentences in the notebook. I hadn't written them. They were testimonies from the people who had listened to us. Words of gratitude, promises to change, memories of forgotten miracles. I flipped through the pages, and each one seemed to fill itself with what people felt when they heard the story. I was stunned. Jesus was no longer with us physically, but the notebook was. It was his way of keeping on traveling, leaving footprints where the asphalt never fades. Bruno summed it up in a phrase that shook me. You no longer carry packages, Iker. Now you carry seeds. I pressed the notebook to my chest, looked at the road ahead, and I knew there were still many towns, many squares, many hearts thirsty for a word. The sun beat down as we entered a rougher stretch of highway, surrounded by dry hills and dusty shrubs. The GPS didn't mark any nearby towns, but an old sign appeared on the right, Santa Aurelia, 8 kilometers. I had never heard that name. I turned without thinking. The dirt road was harsh, but when we reached the town I understood. Santa Aurelia looked like a wounded place. The dusty streets were almost empty, windows boarded up, the few children playing ran off when they saw us pass. There was fear in the air, that kind of fear you breathe when violence settles in as a neighbor. I parked in the main square. A few men sitting on the corner eyed us with suspicion. I didn't get out abruptly. I did it slowly. Bruno, clutching his notebook, followed me. We walked to a bench under the shade of a tree. I pulled out the notebook and began to read aloud, without waiting for an audience. It all began when I stopped the truck to give water to a man in the middle of the desert. At first no one came closer, but the words floated in the air like a perfume impossible to ignore. A woman stopped to listen from afar. Then an old man with a hat. Later, even the men on the corner, the ones who seemed to own the silence of the town, crossed their arms and slowly approached. I read the part about the boy rescued at the curve, about the reunion with Julian, about Lucia serving me cornbread in silence. Each sentence seemed to open cracks in hardened faces. When I finished, a heavy silence fell. And then one of the men spoke. Who wrote that for you? I showed him the notebook. I only received it. But what's in here doesn't belong to me. It belongs to everyone who listens. The man snatched the notebook. He opened it roughly, and was left speechless. There, on the last page, was a new phrase I hadn't written. Violence is not stronger than water when someone dares to open the fountain. The man swallowed hard. His eyes, hard as stone, grew wet. My brother died in these streets, he murmured. I always thought the only answer was to strike back. But maybe I've been wrong. The woman who was listening broke into tears. The children, who had been hiding, began to come out little by little and play again in the square. It was as if the town's air had changed, as if the words had cleansed something that had been stagnant for years. Bruno looked at me in awe. It's not us, he whispered. It's the notebook. But I knew the truth. The notebook was only a medium. The real miracle happened when someone dared to listen. That night, As we slept in the van under the open sky, Bruno asked me, "Iker, what if this notebook never fills up? What if it's meant to keep being written until the last kilometer?" I hugged him by the shoulders. "Then we'll keep going wherever the road takes us." The next morning found us with the sun slowly rising over the endless line of asphalt. I drove without a set destination, only following that invisible compass that seemed to guide each kilometer. Bruno flipped through the notebook in silence, as if searching for an answer that hadn't appeared yet. After several hours, in the distance we saw a strange sight, a group of young men walking along the dusty sidewalk. 5, maybe 6. Heads down, worn backpacks, torn clothes. They didn't raise their hands to ask for a ride, just walked as if they had nowhere to arrive. I braked, rolled down the window. "Do you need help?" I asked. The one who seemed the oldest, with a hardened look, answered without stopping. "No one can help us." But his companions did stop. One of them, almost a boy, barely whispered, "We want to get anywhere, where they don't chase us." Bruno looked at me urgently. I nodded. "Get in," I told them. "At least to the next town." They hesitated. The oldest glared at them. "Don't trust anyone. Don't you get it? No one's going to save us." Then, without me opening it, the notebook resting on the passenger seat slid down and fell open onto my lap. A new phrase, written in fresh ink, gleamed on the page. "Hope doesn't travel alone. It always fits in an empty seat." The boys saw it. Their eyes widened. The oldest stepped back, as if struck by something invisible. "Who wrote that?" he asked, voice trembling. I looked him in the eyes. "The road wrote it. And if you read it, then it belongs to you too." The silence was long. Finally, one by one, the young men climbed in. Even the oldest, though with his jaw clenched, took a seat in the back. We drove on. For kilometers they didn't say a word, until the youngest pulled out a harmonica and began to blow a timid melody. Little by little, the others joined in with soft claps. It was simple music, but it brought a little light back into the cab. Bruno, smiling, opened the notebook and showed them the pages. The young men began to read, and each word seemed to lift a piece of the burden they carried. The oldest finally broke into tears. "I thought we were doomed. But this says we can still go back." I placed a hand on his shoulder as I drove. The road never condemns anyone. It only gives second chances. The sun was setting when we reached a crossroads that led to a community center. The young men decided to stay there. The oldest said goodbye with red eyes, and before getting out, wrote on a blank page of the notebook, "Today someone gave us a seat. Tomorrow it will be us giving space to others." Bruno stroked those words as if they were gold. I started the engine again, my heart full of a certainty. Every encounter was writing a new chapter that didn't belong only to me, but to everyone thirsty for hope. The sky began to darken strangely, long before nightfall. The clouds gathered like enraged giants, and the wind blew with whistles that sounded like warnings. Bruno clutched the notebook to his chest. I kept the wheel steady. We had been through storms before, but something about this one felt different. It wasn't just rain. It was as if the road itself was about to test us. And then, without us touching it, the notebook opened by itself on Bruno's lap. A new phrase, written in firm letters, froze our blood. "Do not fear the storm. It brings the last delivery." I stared in disbelief. "The last one?" I whispered. The rain fell all at once, like an ocean spilled from the sky. The wipers barely kept up. The road vanished before us. Suddenly, a flash, a crashed car in the ditch, barely visible through the curtain of water. I braked with difficulty. We ran through the rain to the vehicle. Inside, a trapped family, an unconscious man, a desperate woman, and 2 crying children. "Help us!" she shouted. I didn't think. I got the children out first, covering them with my jacket. Bruno helped the woman. Together we managed to pull the man out and lay him on the soaked asphalt. He wasn't breathing well. The notebook, dripping wet in Bruno's hands, showed another new phrase, written as if the ink itself resisted the rain. The water you give always returns multiplied. I remembered the first time it all began, a simple bottle of water offered in the desert. Without hesitation, I searched in the van for the saline solution still left from past deliveries. Carefully we administered it to the man. He coughed, breathed, opened his eyes. The woman knelt and embraced us, crying under the storm. The children looked at us as if we had performed magic. But I knew the truth. The real miracle had always been in stopping. When at last the rain began to ease, the family was taken to a nearby shelter with the help of other drivers who arrived later. Bruno and I returned to the truck, drenched, exhausted. The notebook was dry again. And on the last page, one more phrase, as if written just for me. You no longer run. Now you deliver life. That night, as the road stretched out endlessly before us, I understood what Jesus had wanted to teach me from the beginning. It wasn't about packages, or kilometers, or even surviving the storms. It was about stopping when others keep going. About giving water when someone is thirsty, even if it isn't always water they ask for. Bruno slept peacefully, the notebook open on his chest. I drove under a clear sky, certain that every curve held a story and every delivery was more than merchandise. It was hope. I never saw Jesus on the road again. But I no longer needed to. His mark was in every encounter, in every written word, in every transformed face. And most importantly, it was in me. Today, whenever someone asks me what I carry in my truck, I smile and reply, stories. Stories that can save lives. Because that night when I gave water to a man in the desert, I didn't just save him. He gave me back the thirst to live.